Today, Governor Mark Sanford, as we all know now, joined Senator John Ensign as a Republican, mentioned, for 2012 until today, until he mentioned the affair today. Here's Governor Sanford just 2 months ago on this program.
But are you going to run for president? You're doing all this theater. You must be up to something. This is a national thing you're doing right now. You're on my show, by the way, which is a leading indicator you're going national.
No, I tell you what, we're going national on 2010, which is, I happen to be chairman of the Republican Governors Association.
Okay.
2012 matters not one iota for the Republican Party unless you get 2010 right with regard to redistricting and the census based on the governorships that are at play.
Okay. Well, that's Mark Sanford. We hope to have him on again soon, by the way. Is being in the mix for 2012 a curse? To reassess the field, we have NBC Chief White House Correspondent and NBC News Political Director Chuck Todd and the WashingtonPost.com's Chris Eliza. Gentlemen, two experts on a yucky day, but let's talk politics and away from the affair itself. It looks to me, gentlemen, remember we all heard about the King Tut's tomb thing way back in the beginning of the 20th century. A bunch of people went down into that grave, and everybody seemed to start dying. What is it about this pursuit of 2012 that seems to be killing off Republicans? Sanford, Ensign, Palin's not had a good time. Gingrich, of course, got crazy over Sotomayor. Jindal, not exactly a great debut as he went past that winding staircase in that scene from, well, Streetcar Named Desire, maybe. And Rick Perry, of course, he talks secession all of a sudden in his moment of madness. What do you think, Chuck Todd? Is something strange that's making Haley Barbour bob to the surface here?
No, what it is let's look at the people that seem to are getting it right. Are the ones that are sort of with a tortoise-like mindset, number one, and number two, have sort of been around the block. Haley Barbour's been around the block before. You're not going to see him not have his own personal house in order before he pokes his head up. Yeah. I mean, in the cases of Ensign and Sanford, they clearly didn't have their own house in order before they poked their head up. Jindal, I think in the case of him, he was listening to too many consultants, getting too much advice. That's the mistake of a first-time candidate, or somebody trying to move up into the major leagues. And so, all of a sudden you look around and you see a guy like Mitt Romney who, he's made all his mistakes. He's been around the block. Haley Barbour, he was there when the Republican Party last was at this low point, and he helped rebuild it. He's been around a block. He's seen guys make a lot of mistakes. And so suddenly you're looking at a field where I think you're going to see these plodding, boring guy. I mean, I watched Tim Pawlenty in Minnesota, who in a weird way, when he went through the whole VP vetting process himself, got a taste of it, but he's doing this in a much lower key fashion so far than some of these other guys. So
so veterans do well in the playoffs, right? That's the old argument.
That's exactly right.
I know, but you were doing this with such tremendous clinical perfection. I have to hand it to you. How you stayed so far from the yuck, which you should properly. So, Chris, maybe you won't be that successful with this, but I have to tell you, it is astounding if you compare these lists. Mark Sanford was just a month ago debating the issues of the Republican governor's successes coming up next year with me. John Ensign looked like $1 million. He's central casting in terms of looks and background, it seemed. Gingrich was hot back on the playing field again until he got a little too hot. And then Jindal, obviously his debut was a bit premature. And then Rick Perry talking secession, not exactly a move if you want to lead the Union, to say you want to leave it. Not a good starter. What do you make? What do you make of this thing today?
Chris, I'll talk just about Ensign and about Sanford, because in the last 2 months I've spoken with both of them for a relatively extended period of time about the state of the Republican Party and their own role in that. I mean, John Ensign told me point blank over the phone, I'm going to play a bigger national role because my party needs leaders like me. We need people to step up. The ability to, I guess, to put it nicely, compartmentalize the fact that you have this other thing going on here, which is going to sidetrack your ability to emerge as a national leader. I found absolutely astounding that Mark Sanford would go on your show and say, well, we're focused on 2010, but be very coy, clearly, about 2012. He was doing any number of things behind the scenes to prepare for 2012, including emerging as one of the leaders of these Tea Parties, the fiscal conservative wing of the party, when he knew, when he had been visiting this person who he had been romantically linked to for the better part of the last year. I find find it in a way sort of stunning and amazing that they're able to bifurcate their national ambitions with these things that are clearly big hurdles in the way of those national ambitions.
Well, Chris, we had John Edwards announce his presidential campaign and do it.
Right.
So you can't ever figure humans out, right?
That's what makes, and you know what, Chris, that's what makes, and Chuck, that's what, we all agree on this, I know, Chuck and I have talked about it. That's what makes covering politics so fascinating. People, human nature is endlessly fascinating. Covering politicians who act sometimes against their own better interest, it's a fascinating, fascinating thing that we're doing.
So one of the things a politician has to have, he or she has to have the ability to compartmentalize, like with iron, the ability to keep the thing that they're really worried will get caught so out of their heads that they can perform well, even knowing it's there intellectually, but not emotionally. Amazing stuff. We're learning something all the time about the people we cover. Chuck Todd, thank you so much for joining us from the White House. And, of course, Chris Salez of the Washington Post.